So heading into Saturday night's divisional round matchup, the Titans coming in, barely got into the playoffs, but surely feeling good about themselves with some momentum coming off of last weekend's road victory over the New England Patriots. Coming into this matchup, having to feel good about themselves and wondering if you could beat the Patriots in New England in the playoffs, who can't you beat? And meanwhile, here come the Baltimore Ravens with their top 5 defense and their second-year quarterback, the league MVP, Lamar Jackson, having run roughshod over the league in 2019. Best record at 14-2, winners of their last 12 games. Had the bye, 2 weeks to prepare for this. And you're looking at him and you're saying, okay, it was nice what Tennessee did. This could be a competitive game. They will have to account for Derrick Henry, who was monstrous against the New England Patriots. But the Ravens can't fall victim to the same things, right? The MVP is going to show up and play big in the spotlight, right? Yeah. Well, a lot of us were right about one thing. The game wasn't going to be that close. It was going to be a double-digit blowout. But did anybody really, truly see this coming? Did you really expect this? Like, even if you expected the Titans could win, or believed they would win, or thought they would win, did you in any way, shape, or form think they would put forth the ace whooping on the Baltimore Ravens that they did on Saturday night? Incredible stuff. This is very reminiscent to me of the Jets back in Rex Ryan's time, where they're beating top teams in their places in the first 2 rounds of the playoffs. It's kind of what it feels like. And this is crazy. Because it's not just that the Titans won. It was the manner and fashion with which they won. I mean, just who saw this coming? And you look at this game and you say, you're expecting the Ravens to be able to come out and do what they've done all year long, and none of that happened. Before you know it, you're looking, it's early second quarter, and after 2 big plays by Tannehill, it's 14-0. You get the benefit of Jonnu Smith's butt cheek hitting down in bounds. There's 1 touchdown. Then the big bomb down the field, 14-0. You're like, whoa, what's going on here? We got ourselves something. Reality was we really didn't, because this was never really truly a game. And what will be interesting to me is kind of the narratives that will come out of this game. Like, first and foremost, Derrick Henry, once again, was an absolute monster. It's fascinating during the week that Earl Thomas talked about how the New England Patriots didn't look like they wanted any pieces or any parts of Derrick Henry, and they didn't want to tackle him, but the Ravens were different. Not really. Y'all got shredded for 195 yards on the ground, too. And you let him hit you for a jump pass touchdown. Good Lord almighty. Derrick Henry is a force. Derrick Henry is a beast. What perfect timing for him to do this when he's in a contract year. But you look at the Ravens, you look at the Titans, and you look at how they're getting it done. They're winning the battle up front on both the offensive and defensive side of the ball. As a consequence on offense, Derrick Henry, who's already a load to tackle in and of himself with that size-speed combination, now he's getting a running start before he gets any contact. He's just going to kill you in that case. And for the second week in a row, he has done it to an elite 2019 NFL defense. First the Patriots, and then the Ravens. Another elite defense was absolutely shredded by Derrick Henry. And what is so fascinating about this to me is on the offensive side of the ball, is it's not like Ryan Tannehill is having to light the world on fire. It's not like Ryan Tannehill is having to carry this team in any way, shape, or form. He's more like a crossing guard, directing traffic as much as anything else at this point. I mean, you look at this game, 7 of 14 passing, what was it, 83 yards? But did it really matter? Because he made a couple of key throws in big spots, and it just points to the fact that stats can be misleading. Because if you looked at the box score without watching this game, you would look at it and you would say, Lamar Jackson, my goodness. He had over 500 yards of total offense. 360 plus as a passer, 140 plus as a runner. Yeah, that was great. But a lot of that was in garbage time when they were down 3 scores. A lot of that doesn't factor in that Lamar Jackson had turnovers via interceptions on bad throws, the bad decision to not just either eat the sack or throw the ball away, trying to do too much and leading to a back-breaking fumble that really ended any and all momentum the Ravens may have hoped to attain in that fourth quarter. It's not just about the numbers. It's about what you do within those numbers. And Tannehill certainly was not great. Let's not kid ourselves. But he didn't need to be great because Derrick Henry was so dominant, that Titans' offensive line in the running game was so dominant, and that Titans' defense, frankly, was dominant in the ways they needed to at the times that they needed to be. It's that simple. So Lamar puts up these big numbers. It don't matter two hella beans. Tannehill doesn't do much. Like, realistically, I know he had 3 touchdowns total. But in terms of like massive yardage and mass of attempts of throwing the football, there just wasn't a lot, and there didn't need to be. Which is why it sometimes aggravates me so much that wins and titles alone become such a big-time quarterback stat. Because how much did Ryan Tannehill really do to win this game for his team? Statistically, it looks like from terms of yardage and passing attempts, not much. But he also made some big plays. But it was also a total team win. And what's really dynamic to me about this is you look at the Ravens and Lamar Jackson, the young second-year quarterback, the league MVP, he had a bad day. Let's not spin it any other way. He had a bad day. He did not play at the MVP level that this team needed him to, especially when it mattered. But you also had receivers dropping the ball. You also had John Harbaugh making bad decisions and bad play calls to go for it on 4th and short, and just in general getting thoroughly outclassed and outcoached by Mike Vrabel. And then you had a Ravens defense that was a top 5 unit in yards allowed this year, top 5 against the run, getting shredded to the tune of 195 yards on the ground by Derrick Henry. So I'm not saying Lamar Jackson does not deserve blame for this loss. He absolutely does. It used to be my frustration with guys like Peyton Manning and others. Whenever their teams won, it was always all about them. And it's always anybody talked about was just them. And everything runs through them. And everything's about them. But as soon as their team loses, some guys seem to escape most of that blame. A la Peyton. And you can't tell me with a straight face that he didn't. There were always excuses. There were always justifications and blah, 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 blah. But then you get certain guys like Lamar here that are apparently looking to eat the majority, if not all of the blame for his team's loss. And that's not fair. It's also not accurate. You win and lose as a team. Lamar, being the star, the dude of his team, let his team down in some ways. I do not dismiss that. And we cannot dismiss that. And you could argue certainly that this was a second straight year that he didn't show up big when he needed to in the playoffs, and that is certainly true. But he's also all of, 23 years old? 2 years into his career? Before we start calling him the great choke artist or say that he's never going to win one, let's allow a little bit more of his career to kind of play out. Because the reality is, if he wasn't so dynamic and he wasn't so spectacular this year, the Ravens aren't in this spot. And if the defense hadn't been so good throughout the course of the year, they wouldn't have been in this spot. But that's also why they're not advancing to the AFC Championship game, is because that defense came in and absolutely laid an egg. I'm just calling for a fair and equitable distribution of the blame where it is due. Like, Tannehill is going to get a ton of credit. Probably more than, frankly, he really deserves, when it was so much about Derrick Henry and what the Titans defense did to Lamar Jackson and the Baltimore Ravens offense. Let's just be fair and consistent and equitable in how we distribute both credit and blame. But this is a really big time win on the road. Another tough spot against the league MVP. This was impressive stuff by the Tennessee Titans. No matter what happens next week, this has been a great finish to their season. It's hard to say right now that you can automatically think, well, at the time of this recording, I don't know whether it's going to be the Texans or the Chiefs that they have to go play next week in the AFC Championship game. But you can't dismiss them. You absolutely can't dismiss them. Because they could beat either one of those teams, especially with the momentum that they have. Especially if you look at the Texans and the Chiefs having to face up against Derrick Henry. It almost feels like it's unsustainable for Derrick Henry, 3 straight games of 180-plus yards rushing, but nonetheless, he's doing it. And you would have thought after last week's game against New England that Baltimore would have figured out something to at least do a little bit better job of containing him, to put more of the pressure on Ryan Tannehill, and they failed to do so. It's incredible, man. A 6 seed has gone in to 2 straight adverse environments against one team with the greatest quarterback of all time, the other team with the MVP of the league quarterback, and they've beaten them both. And it looks like, for Christ's sakes, they're getting even better. All the while, it's a tough loss for the Baltimore Ravens. You had the best record in the league, won your last 12 games in a row heading into this spot, had a week of rest. You're at home, got home field advantage, the MVP of the league, top 5 defense, and you came out and laid an egg. If anything, you could point to, when you want to talk about criticism, let's point again to John Harbaugh and the decision to rest a lot of his starters in Week 17. You basically went 3 weeks without some of your marquee players playing in any meaningful type of football whatsoever. And the precedent is there when it comes to rest or not rest for these teams that clinched their first round byes and their playoff spots very early on. It doesn't work out. Don't do it. I understand you want to avoid the potentially season-damaging, catastrophic injury to somebody like Lamar Jackson or so on and so forth. I totally get and understand that. But the precedent is there consistently that teams that rest their starters too often in Week 17, especially those that have a bye, there is so much there in terms of rust. You got to sit there and take time to get your feet wet, and by the time you do that, you're facing off a wild card team that won their previous game in the playoffs. They're coming into your place. They've got some momentum. They've got some confidence. They've got their rhythm, and by the time you catch up too often, it can be too damn late. So if you want to put this game on to anybody, truly, like if you were looking at one singular individual, it's John Harbaugh. He's the one that made the bad decisions on 4th and short and the bad play calls. He's the one that didn't have his team better prepared. He's the one who didn't find a way for his defensive scheme and his defensive team and defensive coaching staff to adjust to what the Titans were doing with Derrick freaking Henry. He's the one that made the decision ultimately to rest Lamar and so many of their starters in Week 17, and now it came back and jumped up and bit him in the ass. Hopefully this will send a message to other teams. If you are in this spot in the future and you think about resting, don't. Because the football gods have a way of coming back and savaging you for that decision.